There's trillion dollars flowing through Forex markets every day. Yet some traders are making more money in niche submarkets than most seasoned professional traders. Why? Because they're hunting where the inefficiencies actually live. In today's episode, we're going to be breaking down every market we've traded from and discussing where does real money-making opportunities exist, what markets are the most exploitable, and then what markets are the most scalable. This isn't about chasing shiny objects and constantly switching strategies, but it's about identifying where does information asymmetries, behavioral biases, and even structural inefficiencies exist, and where can we exploit them. In other words, where can I still find money that others are leaving on the table? Let's get straight into this episode. What market has the most alpha? Otherwise, what I'm saying is what market has the most opportunities for you to make money and the most scalability as well. I think both Pedma and me have traded almost every market. I've done futures, crypto, equities, both in large caps and small caps. I've done a bit of options and done a very small bit of currencies such as Forex. But I will say those are probably the spaces I've least ventured into. What about you, Pedma? What sort of markets have you traded?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I also like the first market I've a quote unquote traded was like binary options. Do you know those?
From a very long time ago. I thought they were like fully just scams, or could you actually
Yeah.
like make money?
No, I don't think so. And yeah, they were scams, they were bucket shops, and they were banned in Europe also. But I have a funny story actually. My first taste of trading was trading again, quote unquote, because it's literally like gambling, was binary options. And I actually the first time I did, I turned like $10 into $600 doing that.
That's crazy.
I Yeah, I have a story. I wrote that story on my newsletter a few times, but it was complete luck. Like I was not using any system or anything. I don't think you can beat that. It's literally a gambling house, you know. But it was funny because the market was only going up, and I thought it was 2016, I think, and I thought I was a genius, and I just kept buying and buying and waiting for the 1 minute or 5 minute close, and I turned $10 into 600. But over the next few months, if I'm not mistaken, or weeks or whatever, I just lost it all.
Was just pure luck. You get those every once in a while, but at least from like a position of what market do I actually think have the most alpha, meaning opportunities you can extract from. I will say if you just want to stop listening here, it's going to be crypto by far. Now, obviously, we're going to get into more of the details, like what sort of opportunities and what sort of other markets are really good for different sort of positions. But from my experience, especially recently, crypto by far has some of the best outlier positions, especially ones where you can even make a very solid return just by farming like points or incentives. Like that's been going on a lot now with perp dexes. Primarily, what that is just a decentralized exchange. The main ones at the moment were Hyperliquid, Lighter, Extended, I think a couple more. But very close to Pedma because Pedma actually did quite decently with the points on Hyperliquid. And then I've also now been farming points as well on Lighter, and then he's been farming points on Extended. And those are sort of things where you don't need a crazy amount of capital to farm a decent amount of points. Now, obviously, it's a waiting game. You don't know when those points are going to be redeemable or for how much, but they can provide very outsized returns. But it is more of a patience game.
Yeah, it's like a long tail, like distribution type play. Because if you play it at scale, not only per dexes, but let's say you are a proper like airdrop farmer in crypto, what you'll see is that many protocols, you lose in most of them money or make very little money for the time you spent there. But there's a few every year, depending on the market, that you really hit it off like big, you know. But it's a very like patience driven game. You have to be there farming points, making volume. But it's a very like for people with small capital, if you can go and help these protocols, these new protocols, like understand what their users need and give opinions and stuff like that, it's a very good way to grow capital. I know a lot of people that did that, not only through points, but also through incentives, sometimes even getting a job because they are very early users of that platform.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually did a tweet a while back on what were my kind of favorite markets for automation. And I'd also say that sort of lines up for opportunities, at least from how I'm looking at it. So number one for automation would definitely be futures. And I would say futures is a great place to experiment in the sense that it's very controlled like a very controlled foundation. You're not going to have an exchange rug pull you. You're not going to have a contract mess up and you're going to lose money and it's going to go absolutely nowhere. No sort of issues like that. But you're not also going to get exaggerated returns or any more, let's say, obscure opportunities like arbitrage and futures. If you just want to experiment and automate maybe some basic momentum or trend following strategies, futures is amazing for that. I'd also say futures has great leverage. So if you're starting with a smaller account, it's very possible to use. Now, obviously, you have to be careful with leverage. It's a double-sided sword. But for me, futures has been a great foundation for all risk premiums. And I'd say that also now is very applicable in crypto, but you don't have as much infrastructure certainty, let's say, to compare to futures. I don't think you ever traded futures, right, Pedma?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, at least from my experience, I'd say like if I was rating it for the most alpha, I would probably put it third, I would say. Yeah, probably third. Because number one would be for me crypto, two would be small caps, futures is fourth, third would be options, and last would be currencies. That's probably my ranking. What about you?
I would even put equities above futures and options, to be honest.
Holy crap, how did I forget about that?
Yeah.
That's fair. I would put equities. Well, I guess small caps is kind of what I was looking at as equities, but yes, in more like, let's say, large cap equities, especially recently, like there's been some very solid opportunities like with Hood and Open. Both of those were very nice plays. I would put equities third, I would say.
Yeah. I think that futures is a very like you were saying, like risk premium based market. Again, I don't trade it, so it's to me, I'm just using my opinion and whatever I hear from others, but it's more risk premium based like market, because every data point, whatever, it's probably already explored, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I would say so. Like futures is the most competitive landscape you would be able to have, and it's also the most efficient. But you can still do a very good job with basic kind of risk premium and trend following
Yeah.
strategies. If you have a large enough portfolio, plus you have a diverse enough portfolio, meaning that you're not just trading ES and NQ, you're trading a lot of different contracts. I think you can do an amazing job in returns, but you're not going to get anything like in crypto with finding an obscure opportunity and you can 100x, for example.
Yeah, exactly. It's like in crypto also, I'm running risk premium, right? In the majority of my portfolio. So I'm not like one of those guys that is pure alpha. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. I would also say, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but most of the markets that have the most alpha are very seasonal. Like small caps was very seasonal. Large caps, for the most part, don't have as much alpha, but when they do, it's normally on a seasonal factor, if that makes sense, like earning season, those sort of kind of periods. That's normally from what I've seen. And with futures, there is no seasonal thing really to it. You're going to maybe get a bit less volatility in some periods of the year, but for the most part, it is quite consistent, at least in trend following aspects. You can have that trend following working all times of the year, and you could get solid returns for the most part. Whereas in crypto, you could have a 2-year stint where things are more sideways, let's say.
The only thing I would say in futures maybe is like, imagine that you are one guy that works or has a company or whatever in the oil rigs or something really niche that affects like futures markets, and you can extract some alpha from there from stuff that you see on the job, like, or you are an analyst specifically focused on harvests or something like that, and you can do that. Maybe there's some alpha there, but it's because you are so deep in that niche,
Yeah. I
I
had
guess.
very limited experience with it because I only ever met, I think, 2 energy traders in my life, and both of them were very successful, ironically.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot more was a fundamental understanding. It more reminded me of value trading in some aspects, if that makes sense. Like they were finding mispricings and they were able to understand that.
Exactly. It's like it's not that you're going to find that alpha on the chart, right? You're going to like put an indicator and you're going to find that alpha. No, it would be about being very niche and very like out of the box stuff, because futures is so competitive and so many people do it.
I have a really interesting question. Would you recommend when people are new to trading, I'm saying like completely fresh, would you recommend them to go for the place that has the most alpha or with the most infrastructure kind of first?
I would definitely say the most alpha, and I would say that because it's going to be very hard to compete at those big markets. Again, if you have a very, it depends. Like if you are one of those persons that works on some weird like farm or whatever, or oil rig or whatever, and you understand like you have very niche, how can I say, niche knowledge
Understanding?
about,
Yeah.
yeah, about the field, and that field it correlates with some market derivative or whatever. Like that's alpha that you have and that you can use on a more established market. But for most people, for most beginners, I would say that going for the most the markets that have most alpha and that you can do much better with your little capital would be best.
So I agree, but not for the very beginning of your journey. At least from me looking back, the first couple of months, or maybe let's say month of trading, was super overwhelming. And if I had to learn how crypto operated as well, I think it would be maybe a bit too much. I don't know. Like I guess back then there was less resources. There are better resources nowadays, but I would probably at least for the first month trade something very standard like equities, for example. Everyone mostly has access to a brokerage or some kind like that. Learn the very basics there, and then I would very quickly transition to a place that has the most alpha, because you're completely correct. If you're wanting to get above average returns or even compete in a place where you could really grow a small account, it's going to be in these places like crypto, maybe like small caps as well. Those sort of areas where you're going to have a very large edge, and then from there you can even transition back to more, let's say, traditional equities when you have a way bigger portfolio size, or you just simply take on less risky opportunities in those particular markets.
Nothing wrong with that. With taking like a time to understand like the operational side and be in markets that are more like legitimized, and you can understand what's going on behind the book and everything like that. No problem. But you ain't like you ain't going to grow a $10,000 account making like 15% a year.
Yeah, unless you start in maybe small caps and equities. That's probably the only sub pocket I know of.
But yeah, for sure. I started there. You started there. I wasn't very good at it. You were much better than me. But definitely, I also started there. Like it was the place for the beginner. So
Do you I know we both don't have that much experience with options, but I have a very similar opinion to, I think it's Ewan Sinclair, where he was like the most competitive place to be is in options. And I wouldn't ever recommend like traditional, just if you're getting started with trading, to go with options, even though it seems like a very popular niche, mainly because there are so many things that factor into options that most people just do not understand.
yeah, I know so little about it that I'm even afraid to comment on that.
All right, fair enough.
So there's a few other markets that I find quite interesting. Like for example, the other day I was looking at it's going to appear like quite random, but like CS, the game CS:GO skins, like the markets for skins have a lot of volume going behind it, and a lot of people that wanna just buy those skins at completely insensitive prices because they just want to play with a nice skin for a gun or whatever. And if you check, like you can Google the index for CS skin goes, and you can see that is a chart that is always going up, almost like crypto or something, and it's quite volatile and very interesting place. I bet if people spend more time there, like newer people with time, that they could find a lot of edge there. I would be like, I would put my hands on fire to say that people would find edge there. There's so much capital in there, and just kids that.
Fair. I was also saying, like, I saw just some of your notes here. A lot of markets, and I think this is the hard thing of saying which market has the most alpha, is that you have subsections of markets. And I do still think in general, crypto has the best subsections, where there's always a subsection that has a very solid alpha running at that moment. Like right now, it seems like most of it is DEXs. A couple of months ago, it was mainly meme coins. And if you can kind of become specialized in those sub niches, you can just make an absolute killing. Similar to like how small caps is and like equities, for example, and stuff like that.
Yeah. The only thing about it is that stuff in crypto is very seasonal. So
Yeah.
when everyone is demanding leverage, like very strong periods, you'll find these locations everywhere. You'll find like funding arbitrages. I saw Ethereum at one point paying 60% annualized.
Wow.
Ethereum, which is the second I think, the second most liquid asset on crypto, right? And it was paying 60% annualized just if you shorted the contract on one place and you long the spot, basically, because everyone is like demanding leverage, and you can, if you want to play delta neutral games, you can play those games. Yeah, it's just like I was saying, it's very seasonal.
That's ridiculous. But what was some of the other kind of niches you were maybe looking into?
Yeah, you have other niches. You have NFTs, right? NFTs are a bit seasonal as well. It's volumes, but I was listening to a podcast of a girl that started doing market making on NFTs, and I was like, how? What kind of returns do you do doing that? And during seasons where NFTs are really strong and people are selling in them back and forward, you can make a lot of money doing that. It's quite impressive because think about it. NFTs are not the most liquid market, and if there's someone willing to provide a bid and provide a ask for certain NFTs that are liquid enough, and you can get your percentage there, premium, like, it's a good service to provide. And I was listening to that podcast. I think it was in Flirting with Models, if I'm not mistaken, and it was pretty interesting what they were doing there. So people find edges everywhere, which is pretty interesting to me.
That actually really reminds me of like Polymarket, right? Like we've talked about it a couple of times on the podcast, like that, especially for a new account and smaller account size. There are amazing price insensitive sort of things you can exploit on Polymarket, or even just fundamental ones. Like we were talking about some of the bets that you could kind of rig to actually win yourself, or that are somewhat rigged. And like those sort of ones can provide really solid returns. I would also say NFTs, like one of the best trades I really annoyed that I missed was like Pengu. Like if you had been focused in the NFT niche when everyone was thinking it's stupid, and just to be transparent, I still think it's a bit of a stupid idea, but at least there are a couple of gems there which are very solid foundations. And if you looked at Pengu's like fundamentals, they were actually doing quite decent in earnings. Obviously they were still overall losing money, but as a startup, if you looked at it like that, it's quite a decent company. And their NFTs, I don't want to say off the top of my head, but I think they at least 10x from last time I looked at it, of the bottom price if you bought it back in like 2022.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's people legitimately just focus on NFTs and doing well there. There's so many, like you were saying, like so many sub niches in crypto. Even that Polymarket stuff that you were saying, I showed you an example. I was like, it's just very simple stuff like market making one of those contracts, one of those betting contracts, and I made pretty good money on that day. It was very intensive. Like, I would have to be there checking the contracts, like checking my bids all the time. I didn't have an automation. I was checking if I was getting filled and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I made like 400 or $500 or something on that like little play, and it was very interesting because you are just there providing a market for people that want to get a bet on. And it was, I think, and it was one of the most like active bets because it was ending on the next day. So you have to be careful if the narrative around that changed and everything. So there's a few risks there that I didn't understand at the time. But if people do that at capacity, there's a lot of edge there. If you check, like, if you want to check it, you can go on the top contract, most liquid contract on Polymarket, and check out the yes and no, and check how many orders go above and beyond the book. Like, someone just fat fingers like a $10,000 order and just blasts through the book. There's a ton of those going around, and if you are there to capture those price incentives, people, and you have a decent, like, fair value estimator of what that contract should look like, and you add your bet and stuff like that, you can make good money every day. So
yeah, 100%. I think overall, if we want to leave it on like where we would actually rank, so we have what, 5 markets in total?
yeah,
So number 1, we both agree, crypto, right?
crypto, exactly.
Perfect. 2, this one's a hard one, I'm not gonna lie. I would probably put,
Probably small caps, no?
yeah, I'd probably put small caps. Actually, well, I guess in general, then we could say equities is number 2 for
Yeah.
opportunities. All right, and then 3, we would put options.
I'm going to refrain from commenting on that. I'm
Well,
not aware of.
I at least know there's very decent structures in options, because I know a couple of guys in options and they're killing it. So I'll put 3 then as options, and then 4 would be forex. No, sorry, 4 would be futures, 5 would be forex.
And in forex, you want to make a comment on forex?
Forex, while I know a couple big traders and they've definitely made currency bets, and I'm not saying you can't make money on a currency bet. There's definitely like fundamental plays you could do. For what everyone advertises Forex to be, there is really not that much alpha or inefficiencies in currencies. Also, you have so many annoying things you have to deal with. Like there's terrible spreads, there's terrible brokerages, all those sort of things just make it quite unattractive, at least to me.
Yeah, I don't think that many people are, and I'm being like kind. I don't think that many people are making money in Forex. You are trading a $1 trillion market. I don't know how much money they move every day, but it's a ton. The most liquid market in the world, and you're thinking you are going to compete against HFT and market makers and stuff like that, people that are working on that every day and going to beat them at data analysis. I think that's a bit unlikely. You have to go. It's that idea that we talk about so much. We are repetitive, but it's the truth. Like you have to go where you are not the top in the game, right? So top in the game, right? So that's all that it is.